Our first company is a unique gold explorer with projects in Korea, the south part, and the gold heartland of Kalgoorlie. Please join me in welcoming the Managing Director of Southern Gold, Simon Mitchell.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks to all of you who are staying in the room. Hopefully you won't regret it. We often bandy about certain terms in this business and things like unique and compelling, but I hope to convince you that indeed we are unique in terms of South Korea. Not many people know much about South Korea. The understanding in Australia is pretty poor actually, but it's an amazing place with incredible potential. We're all familiar with Kalgoorlie, and I guess that's not a unique part, but it's certainly one of the things that underpins the value of the business. So we're a bit unusual in that we have a significant business in Kalgoorlie and an evolving and more important side of the company in Korea. If you were to project yourself forward a few years from now, I would say that I'm going to be talking more about Korea because that's where I can see a lot of the growth in the company, and that's what I tend to talk about mostly in these presentations in terms of where we're likely to go into the medium to longer term. And I hope when you have a look at some of the background slides, you'll get a very strong sense of incredible potential in the country. So, at the moment, what do we have in terms of our asset base? What's the company about? We've got the two jurisdictions. We have a small gold mine in Kalgoorlie called Cannon. We've just completed an open pit there and we're about to go underground. But that's all about generating organic funding for the company. So we have this business model in Southern Gold of extracting what value we can for the assets we have. Cannon is not a great big mine, but it generated a lot of cash for us. We've been living off that for the last 3 to 4 years. And so that's really underpinned a very tight capital structure. In addition to that, we're looking to roll that particular model out in Korea. We've brought in another group called Bluebird Merchant Ventures to operate a couple of mines there, one called Gubong, the other Kochang. Because of the length of the presentation, I'll just dwell on Gubong and leave Kochang for your research later on. But basically, we've also got an incredible amount of blue sky in the business as well. So not only are we trying to generate cash from operations, we are also have got a substantial exploration business. Some background on the company to give you an oversight on what we're about. We've got two recent directors. One is myself. I joined the company about 3 years ago, and Peter Bamford joined about 3 months ago. We're bringing, I guess, a fair bit of background in Korea and narrow vein underground mining. So my background is as a geologist, but mostly in corporate development. And I've had quite a strong and long association with South Korea, which is one of the reasons why we're there. And Peter joined us recently, and that's because a lot of our projects that we're looking at developing are indeed narrow vein underground gold mines. You can see there that we do have a tight capital structure, only about 50 million shares on issue. The board has a big chunk of that, but the main message here is that the top 30 are very stable, have more than half the company, so it's pretty tightly held. Currently funded, you can see there we've got a low valuation, so our enterprise value is less than 10 million Australian. And let's face it, if you're coming to a conference like this, you're looking for little gems to flag, put a little star next to the name of a company, one which you can see has the potential to develop into the medium term. And what you want is something like this, where a company's got a very tidy balance sheet, not many shares on issue, and a valuation that hasn't been overcooked. So you see we've got a very small valuation and a huge amount of value to release going forward. Now, I've been able to convince certain sophisticated investors of this because I've done 2 placements in the last 2 years, one at 35 cents and one at 38.6 cents, which is way above the market. So you're probably wondering, well, why would they do that? And that's because they have a look at our asset base, they see what we're trying to achieve, and they're quite comfortable taking our stock in the mid-30s. We're currently trading at 24, 25 cents. So this gives you a sense of a gap, if you will, between the market perception and perhaps people who have a closer look and really get to the nuts and bolts of the underlying valuation. I said we have an organic funding model, and Cannon is a very good example of that. So you can see there that we basically mined 50,000 ounces. That was in conjunction with Westgold, and we generated substantial profit off that. That's pretty much what's been funding the company for the last few years. We're about to go underground there. It's no longer with Westgold because they sold their assets to Northern Star. So it's Northern Star that we're dealing with at the moment in terms of taking that project forward, and we're just discussing with them at the moment the timing and the development of that mine. Basically what we have there as a company is that we've brought in expertise to execute, and we receive a substantial royalty. So you can see there in that chart at the bottom that we're receiving around $160 to $210 an ounce, depending on the gold price and production level. So we take zero risk in terms of execution. We don't have to finance it, and we've got a very fat royalty on the back of it. The main thing to take away, though, is that the project is open at depth. So while the resource is very modest in size, I've just flagged there that's 23,000 ounces, it's quite high grade and very tight. You can see there from the middle diagram that the actual ore body is going to be very easy to mine. So this will make a lot of money. And so it's one of the reasons why the Westgolds and the Northern Stars are interested in it. And going forward, there's a bit of a question mark about how deep it goes. So that's a very good value add to underpin the company going forward. If you're going to invest in a company in our space, particularly at our market cap, you want to know there are some very good people behind it. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the key people behind the company. The first one there you can see is Douglas Kirwan. So Doug, probably some of you would know who Doug is. He's a relatively famous geologist amongst geologists. He's found probably half a dozen world-class deposits in his career. And that's no fluke. In particular, he was the discoverer of Hugo Dummett with his team, which a lot of people really refer to as Oyu Tolgoi. But Doug's found deposits all throughout Asia. And a lot of people don't know, but Doug had actually a long association with Korea back in his early part of his career. So I appealed to Doug's professional pride, and I said, let's go back there, Doug, and let's have a good look at Korea. He was part of the Ivanhoe team for many years. He led the exploration team. And you can see there we've got Chris Bowden, who did his PhD in Korea, was part of that Ivanhoe team at the time and worked with Doug back in those days. And the third guy, who is the Craig Panther, again, ex-Ivanhoe, one of the top geologists when it comes to epithermal mineralisation analysis and mapping. So these are all, DNA from Ivanhoe. They've all got discovery records. Chris found Dish Mountain in Ethiopia, and Craig's been involved in the discovery of several epithermal projects throughout Asia. So these guys really know their business. On another side of the coin, I'm also looking at developing projects in Korea with the Bluebird Merchant Ventures Group, which is why I've highlighted those other guys. You can see there that Colin Patterson, Charles Barclay and Perry Resabal, these are old hands in the industry. They're based out of Manila. They're sort of hard-working, smell of an oily rag underground gold miners, particularly narrow vein underground gold mining. So this is the sort of thing that is their bread and butter. I've brought them in to work on a couple of the orogenic projects highlighted by those blue arrows, Gubong and Kochang. These are difficult projects to explore, or very expensive projects to explore. So I've brought the miners in. They're reopening the old mines and getting to the quartz vein face and advancing it from underground. Let's just have a quick look at one of those projects. The first one called Gubong. Now this is a very substantial project. You can see there that it's over in Western Korea. The bottom right of the slide shows you a historical map of the underground workings. We believe that more than 120 kilometres of underground development is in place. And for those of you who understand underground mining, you would appreciate that that means you are saving a lot of money. So when you open up a mine like this and the development's already in place, it means you can keep your capital costs to a very modest level. You can also see there that we've draped those historical workings onto both a Google image on the top right, as well as looking at an isometric view of that in the centre, just to give you a sense of scale. It's basically about 500 metres deep in terms of vertical extent. But we believe, because it's an orogenic gold system, that it's likely to go for several kilometres in a vertical direction. In addition to that, you can see here where we think that there is substantial potential along strike. So those historical workings that I was highlighting are in the bottom left of that map on the right-hand side. So on regional scale, there are multiple veins, most of which haven't been properly drilled. And in fact, even at Goobong itself, there's probably only 24 drill holes in a district which can be measured on 5 kilometre scale. So just to put that in perspective, if a typical Western company had this project and they were working on it, there would be perhaps 1,000 drill holes in this thing, and there's only 24 or something like that there at the moment. So highlighting the potential here, you can see there's an exploration target range based on a resource done by the Koreans, which is not JORC, so we turned it into an exploration target range, but it essentially says that there's 500,000 ounces at the bottom of that mine there. But just extrapolate that for a moment in your minds. We've got extent both north and south, and it's open at depth as well. So we expect this to be ultimately a multi-million ounce producer at the end of the day. So I've talked about Bluebird and how we've brought them in as expertise, but we have a very substantial exploration business, including the guys that I was highlighting before, the ex-Ivanhoe guys, the ones who actually make discoveries. Orogenic gold is great, and we're trying to get those into production as soon as we can, but really where we see huge potential to unlock a lot of value is in the exploration side. And that's because Korea has basically been shut for 40 or 50 years. It's a little bit like an exploration time capsule, and we're reopening it. And so we're seeing some very astounding things. So I want you to put a little note in the back of your mind about the potential for new discovery in Korea being much more than your typical jurisdiction. It's simply because no one has really looked there. Here's an example. The Wolyu project, which we worked on last year, we're seeing 1 ounce per tonne type results on rocks on surface. It's very steep, it's a big mountain, the whole thing is altered. We've mapped and sampled and drilled multiple veins at the top of the mountain. It's completely open in all directions. So we don't know how big this thing is. What we do know, though, is that it's got all the building blocks to be a very good project, and we hope to take that forward in the course of this year. And here's another example. Further to the south, we have a project called Hampyeong. This is a bit wider. This is a more developed epithermal system in terms of size. We're seeing 4 to 5 metre wide veins on surface. You can see from the map on the right-hand side that some of the chips on surface are between 4 and 13 grams per tonne. This thing has never been drilled. So we've got a situation which I think is sensational for an exploration group. We've got big kilometre scale alteration systems, multiple veins that are wide, carrying potential ore grade in a system that's never been drilled before. And to put it into perspective, just for those that can kind of get a sense of scale, you can see on the bottom right, that's an aerial photograph of a mine called Unsan, which is a currently operating epithermal gold mine in the south of Korea. And that's to scale, on the same scale as that map that it's sitting in. So you can get a sense of how a mine can sort of sit in there. In addition to that, we are working on a very major project for project generation exercise using Doug Kerwin's database in Thailand and people like Craig Panther, who I mentioned before. And we've got more than 100 targets in country, and we've started to check these. We've gone through perhaps 24 of them. We're down to perhaps 6 to 12, which we think are world-class. And here's an example, just to give you a flavour for it. And to give you a sense of why my belief that the chances of us making discoveries are extremely high. So here we have a new road, and on the top left there, the photograph, you can see there's this new road that's been put through, and you can see the brown section of that road cutting. That's basically what we believe to be an ore body. There is at least 3 veins, basically 1 to 3 metres wide in that hill. We've gone around to the other side of that hill, found a small adit, worked onto the vein, and you can see there that we've got the sort of sulphur salts and sulphides, which we expect to be very high-grade gold and silver. So this is very high-grade mineralisation. In fact, we can see native silver just looking at the samples. So we expect that to be extremely high-grade silver, a very high-grade gold, and the chances of us finding something are very high, assays pending. So just to wrap up, just to pull it all together, You can see here we've got organic funding with our mine. We're very tight. We've got our low capex development under process with Bluebird, who are experts in that area, and I think we've got a very good chance of finding something. Thanks very much.